We interrupt our regularly scheduled programming with an urgent request that every person watching this channel immediately open your Bible and get ready to understand it. 3,000 years ago, upon Mount Moriah, on a piece of property purchased by King David of Israel, there was erected one of the most magnificent and inspiring structures ever created since the beginning of the world, Solomon's Temple. In the 6th century BCE, this, the first temple of Israel, was destroyed by the Babylonians. 2,500 years ago, the foundation of the second temple was laid on that very same mountain in Jerusalem. Israel's second temple was gloriously rebuilt at Zerubbabel's command. Later, their second temple would be refurbished by King Herod. In the 1st century CE, the Roman forces, led by Titus, attacked Jerusalem and leveled their sacred second temple to the ground. And now, in the 1990s, the decade of destiny, you are about to see and hear the testimony of the prophets themselves, bringing to life the hope of Israel and proof beyond doubt that the imminent coming of their Messiah to build and restore the third temple is due to occur in this, our generation.
Blessed be God of Israel, in his temple he shall dwell. No more tears, Jerusalem, Jacob dwells safe in him. Praise the Lord for his word and his love so pure. For his temple the third shall endure. Twice the stones of temples past, shorn of beauty, did not last, but the third shall never fall, for this time God builds the wall. Praise the Lord for his word and his love so pure. For the temple the third shall endure, and through all eternity all the nations blessed shall be, as they sing of light in thee. Shalom, Israel.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the third temple, the hope of Israel. Shalom to all of our Jewish friends. I'm Ken Wade, and we're about to enter into a discussion concerning one of the greatest things that's ever happened in the nation of Israel, the building of the third temple. Now, perhaps you've heard of this, perhaps you haven't, but I think the next hour will prove beneficial educationally, prophetically, and spiritually if you'll take a little time and join us. We have a very special guest today. His name is Frank Shalou. He's an author and he's a specialist on the third temple. He's done plans and drawings and will even have some surprise photos for you at the end of the broadcast concerning the glorious new temple of Israel. And now I'd like to introduce you to Frank Shalou. Nice to have you here, Frank.
I'm glad to be here.
And I'm going to take advantage of you a little bit. And Frank has been a good friend of mine for a long time, but I want to ask you many things which I have not only thought of myself, but over the years heard our Jewish friends talking about concerning this new temple in Jerusalem. But I think in order to get to the new temple, I should ask you the origin of the temple period. Solomon's temple, Herod's temple. What's the background of the temple?
I think it's a very interesting background, the history and the origin of the development of the temple. And I believe it commences with, of all things, Noah's Ark. Now, Noah's Ark was a rectilinear vessel, a barge, in effect, because of the animal cargo that was stored in its hold. And the next development that is a flashback to Noah's Ark is Moses' tabernacle in the wilderness of Sinai. And when you look at this structure, you see that it also is a rectangular box. And this is one of the clues of the relationship with Noah's Ark, the shape.
I'd never heard that before.
No.
That's interesting.
Then you go to the temple. The temple also, when properly seen and constructed according to the scriptures, is also rectilinear with the holy and the most holy, but it's a double unit. It's much larger than Moses' tabernacle, but the same principle is enjoined. Now, we'd like to take a moment to show other comparisons. For instance, the numerics. In Genesis, the 6th chapter, it gives you the dimension of Noah's Ark, and it states that it was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Now, these three numerals have a symbolic significance. When you go to the tabernacle, you find that the numeral 30 is there. The holy was 20 cubits long, the most holy 10. 20 plus 10 is 30. The overall length of Moses' tabernacle was 30 cubits, and it was 10 cubits high. It suggests if you multiply 10 times 30, you come up with the 300 of the length of the ark.
I see.
Another comparison is, let us consider the court of the tabernacle. The tabernacle had curtains surrounding it, and the yard within that confinement was called the court. Each side was 100 cubits long. The width of the yard was 50 cubits. So if you take a peripheral or perimeter measurement, you have 50 plus 100 plus 50 plus 100. You have your 300. And so there's a tie-in that way.
Never
now,
knew
this
that
is only
before.
one in many ways. We would suggest another thing. The ark, the description is that the ventilation and the light entered Noah's Ark through the instrumentality of windows near the roof line. We think it was recessed inward from the outward rim of the roof, like some drawings that you see of Noah's Ark. I believe it gives authenticity to just a few of the sightings. Now, to show that the light could be sufficient, you notice that in many high school and college gymnasiums that the windows are up near the ceiling, not down on a lower level. And it provides adequate light, and you can adjust the windows, the casement windows, to allow sufficient ventilation in. The ark did not have any glass windows. It was open. So you had the light stream in towards the center as a skylight, and air sufficient for both the human and animal cargo. Now, when you see pictures of Moses' tabernacle with it stripped of its coverings, you notice that there are 3 levels there.
What do you mean 3 levels?
All right, let's go back. Noah's Ark had 3 stories.
Okay.
It mentions in Genesis, the 6th chapter, it had 3 floors or 3 stories. When you look at the stripped tabernacle, the basic boards that supported the curtains, you see what's suggested as 3 levels there, looking at this bar line on the outside.
Okay, all right.
And then,
those are the sidebars.
That's right.
Okay, I see what you're talking about.
And then when you come to the 3rd temple, the dimensions according to Ezekiel, you find the same thing is manifest there. There are 3 stories that are very manifest.
To sum up so far, there's a real link between the Ark of Noah, the Tabernacle of Moses, and the temples.
Yes.
A real link there. That the temple wasn't something brand new, that it was like an evolution of something that
exactly.
God had planned
That's what we're
long
suggesting.
before.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Another,
this is new to me, too.
Yeah.
See?
Another thing, too, it tells that the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat, which is plural, a plural form. That does not mean rested upon greater Ararat and little Ararat, but rather greater Ararat itself, which is a double-peaked mountain, and that there would be a plain. There exists a plain now, but it's covered with snow and ice, but that the barge settled on that elevated platform. When you come to the tabernacle, you see that it's settled on a base, a silver base, suggesting water. Oh. That silver lining at the bottom. We're going into just the natural and not the spiritual connotation here. Mm-hmm. But to show these ancients knew nothing about the future development of the temple. As time went on, it was a tabernacle for a long period of time, for over 500 years.
And they died without having seen a temple.
So we're approaching this subject from the standpoint of its, you call it evolution, as it were, as its development. Now, another thing with regard to that, since the ark rested on a platform or on the mountain, which was an elevated platform per se, and that the tabernacle rested on silver socket foundation, you come to the temple and it peculiarly also rests on an elevated platform which is spoken of as being 6 cubits high. It would be very conspicuous when you see the picture that it's elevated and rests on this platform. This is a tie-in too. Now there's another one. We're taking time on this because you have to prove it. Yeah. It's the abundance of clues that gives it, that serve as a confirmation. Another thing with regard to the ark, it was pitched within and without with tar or bitumen. So it was black. It was black. That's why it's difficult to find Noah's Ark today, because when you're looking at the mountain, it's so dark, it cannot be easily spotted. And most people are looking for an article or the ark as being lighter, but it's the color of the black stone of the mountain.
And it's encased in the ice on Ararat?
Encased in the ice, and only on warm seasons.
Now you were there, right?
Yes. Recently.
Do you think you saw it in the ice, or?
No, I wanted to go, but we were not given permission of the government. They felt it was too risky, too dangerous. Okay. Now another thing.
Now this one thing,
yes.
The black covering.
That's it.
Now the tabernacle of Moses.
That's right.
Also had a seal skin, was it covering?
That's exactly it.
That was black.
And it looked like a coffin because of this rectangular shape, and with the black seal skin on being the outermost skin,
right,
that you have that black covering. Now, many do not realize that the temple that's described in Ezekiel was of a similar nature, that the outside of the temple, while it was composed of stones fit together beautifully, that a large portion would be seen as having wooden planks, thick planks, it's described as.
Is that right?
Yeah.
On the outside of
the
new third temple?
Yes.
Well, that's a new one.
Not only interior-wise, which most people would accept, but there are clues that it was on the outside, which it wouldn't be within the purview of this program. Now, another thing. The ark floated on waters. it rode on the water. We suggested that the tabernacle rested on the silver, which is suggestive of water. The tabernacle also was transported from place to place, and you could say, like poetically, that it went from place to place on an ocean of sand.
Okay.
See, this is in this transporting of it from place to place, this travel.
On a riverbed, I might add.
Yes.
A dry riverbed.
Yeah.
The wadis that they pitched it in.
All right. Now, another thing, too, the tabernacle being composed of the outermost curtain of sealed skin, you have a marine animal in the desert. It's an oddity, see. It's out of place. Moses, when, Noah, when he was ordered of the Lord to build this ark, he did it on dry land. And then just as the ark was an oddity, when it says in the Old Testament that it had not rained on the earth prior to the flood, that the dew came as a distillation from the ground, arose from the ground. So his building of the ark on dry ground is an oddity, just like this sealskin is an oddity from another perspective in the desert, a marine animal in the dry desert. I think that would be sufficient to show that there is a relationship between Noah's Ark, the tabernacle structure, and the temple itself.
Okay. Boy, you said a lot quick. I hope we can digest it. Now, as Frank said, he's not going into the spiritual significance of all of these types and shadows and pictures, but really into the physical, to get a feel for what is going to be when that new kingdom in Israel is set up for that third temple, which will be a physical structure. Now, I just want to clarify, this is a sideline before you go to the next thought, that I've heard some people say that the temple is not literal, it's just spiritual. And you believe it's strictly, it is definitely not only a spiritual lesson, but a literal building, right?
Why, certainly, with all the measurements and the minutiae of detail, indicates that it was designed to be built.
So this vision that was given in the Old Testament would be fulfilled in a literal building, not just left it with a vision. As Moses had a vision of the tabernacle, as Noah was given a vision of the ark, and so this vision of Ezekiel might well be put into a physical
well, just like the tabernacle, you have detailed instructions of what the length of the boards were. They were to stand upright in sockets of silver. It gives you the length of the board. By inference, you can determine the thickness of the boards and the sockets and so forth, and the length. It's all given, measurements. So, but even though it was a literal structure, it's from that structure that you then can go onto a higher level or plane of thinking of its symbolism. And so with the temple, the literal temple will have other connotations besides just a beautiful structure.
All right, a quick summation or quick thought on what does the temple mean? If you were to sum it up in a couple of sentences, what does the temple symbolize or mean to the Jew today? To the believing Jew, I should say.
Well, I think their hopes are centered in the coming of Messiah. They do believe in the temple, a certain segment of Jewry. They have faith in the Old Testament and that's just as Solomon's temple and Zerubbabel's temple were leveled. So you find it is also true that their hopes were dashed. So the resurrection of the third temple would mean a restoration of their hopes and what they had been hoping for God's. This was like a medium of contact.
All their hopes and dreams and the complete fulfillment of restoration of Israel, redemption of Israel. Let's talk about the significance maybe of the altar and the laver back in the tabernacle and the temple.
Now again, the origin of the temple comes from Noah's Ark. The first thing Noah did when he went out of the ark was to build an altar. When you look at the tabernacle court, there's an altar outside without. And the tabernacle proper, the centerpiece, would be representative of the ark and the altar outside. We're approaching this from a primitive standpoint.
Yeah.
But it gives you a better appreciation when you go into spiritual symbolism.
For the background.
As a background.
Now, if I were a photographer back in Noah's day, which I couldn't be, but if I had taken a picture after he got off of the ark and of the altar, I would have probably seen the ark behind it, right?
Yes.
As if we were to take a picture of the altar in front of the tabernacle, we'd see the tabernacle behind it. Okay, anything else along that line? You want to, the
All
altar
right.
and the laver?
Before treating the laver, which is another thing, the Noah is, as it were, a prototype of the Messiah. The flood destroyed an evil generation. When Noah and his family exited the ark, when they disembarked, this was the commencement of a new order. And so the coming of Messiah and the construction of the temple and all fit into the beautiful picture of the coming kingdom of God.
As you had trouble, too, before the flood,
right.
and violence and evil and turmoil, and so after the flood, it was like a new beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, the mountain in Armenian is Massus, Mount Mausus, which means mother mountain. And so the ancients viewed that mountain as the birth of a new order.
I got you.
And that's the way they viewed it. Another thing that's interesting, too, even in Islam, which is another branch of the Semitic family, see, there's a kinship relationship. Even in Mecca, one of the chief articles that the focus of attention was on is this black draped rectilinear shaped box. And it's devoid of all other things. And they have a simulation of Mount Ararat, even in Mecca. So when you go there to worship, this is the Islamic faith, that they also go ritualistically around this symbolic... Yes, but they go to this place called Ararat, which is only a short distance away, and they circle it and so forth, and they make an association. They probably don't know themselves that goes back to the flood, because all the human family came from Noah. You know, we usually say everybody has had their origin in Adam and Eve.
That's what I
but
was
that's
gonna say,
also true with regard to Noah.
So we really start, as a human family, we started over with Noah.
That's right, because it was his sons that were in the ark. So he then was the father of, as it were, of a completely new generation, starting over again. Then,
might I make one comment regarding
Yes.
Noah? It's just recently hit me what great faith that man had to be building an ark over a 120-year period. 120 years. And no one's believing him. They all think he's probably not quite right mentally, because he wasn't near a lake, and yet 120 years that ark was in building. And so he was, in many ways, typical, I would think, of the Messiah.
yes.
Yeah.
Then another thing, that altar being outside the ark which he built, outside the tabernacle there was an altar, outside the temple an altar, suggests the need for atonement. This is and that sacrifice, that somehow the sacrifice of animals had a ritualistic symbolism behind it. And it does state that without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. This is the law, the teaching of the law. And we go back to even Adam and Eve. When they sinned, their nakedness was covered with a ram skin, which meant that an animal died to provide that covering for their nakedness. So you have a covering for sin. In the Passover picture, you have the sprinkling of the blood of the lamb on the door of the Israeli dwelling. And it's interesting also how that blood was applied with hyssop, and which was dipped in the blood of a lamb, and it was splattered.
Like this.
Not just swabbed, but splattered on the lintel, which is the upper threshold of the door frame. And by doing that with some violence, suggesting suffering and death, that you'd make a vertical stroke, because as you would try to apply that blood on that upper lintel, your arm would come down. And then the two side posts were also to be sprinkled with blood. And in that motion of doing one side and the other, you're making the configuration of a cross. Even in the Day of Atonement, when the high priest went into the Most Holy, it says that he sprinkled the blood of a bullock across the top of it says eastward before the tabernacle. And that stroke again of doing it that way also makes the form of the upright of a cross. And then it says that before the Ark of the Covenant. And so that side-wide motion there also.
So it'd be on and before.
That's
the
it.
Ark of the Covenant.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Now,
well, it's a powerful picture, though, when you think about it.
So this atonement need is Adam and Eve, and then the Passover picture, and then the Day of Atonement. Now, many feel that this Judaic ritual, where you had animals sacrificed with blood, they think that's terrible. It's
well, on some days, feasts of the year, weren't there thousands and thousands of animals slain? And some people say it's obnoxious.
Now, if you're an unbeliever and so forth, you would have to, that would be an obstacle to many people. But then from another standpoint, to be practical about it, those who are very critical on this point themselves, as it were in a hypocritical fashion, they haven't the slightest qualm or twinge of conscience in the eating of meat. Now, the fact that that slaughtered animal, you're eating it and cooking it and so forth, that animal was slaughtered.
You don't know where it came from.
Yeah, you don't see the slaughter.
You're right.
But and in ancient times, whether you were cooking a chicken or killing a cow, this is the old-fashioned way. Today, everything is done out of sight, out of mind. And
you go to the supermarket.
Yeah. See, we're living in a completely different generation today. Now, then, so we feel that when it's viewed from that standpoint, maybe 1 billion people eat meat. It's true that in India they don't, in some place, but there are almost 5 billion people in this earth. And there's no question on that. So that argument to me is very weak. And the fact that it was done openly, it shows the need for the shedding of blood for the atonement of sin.
Okay.
Then one other point. The very mountain on which the third temple is to be built is Mount Moriah.
Right.
And it's interesting that Abraham was to sacrifice his son Isaac on Mount Moriah,
right,
which is the mount in which. Now, in the picture in the Old Testament, it says an angel stayed Abraham's hand, so it wasn't necessary for him to actually kill Isaac, as he was instructed to do. But it showed, in effect, that Abraham's faith in God, that he would even sacrifice his own son. That's how much confidence he had, that God had some reason, even if he couldn't fathom it,